would seem that I am condemned to be the prophet that nobody knows about, with way too small a platform from which I proclaim things long in advance that then eventually not only get proven, but picked up on by people who have much larger platforms. Maybe it's easy for me to say that, but it's nonetheless true. Now, I have been saying about Donald Trump for over a year now, ever since June 15th of last year when he came down that staircase at Trump Tower like Apollo Creed at the beginning of Rocky IV. You know, living in America. And he launched his candidacy, and we all know who and what Donald Trump is. And I've been saying ever since that day that Donald Trump is validating every lie ever vomited upon us, ever vomited upon conservatives and Republicans by the left, by the Democrat Party. Every false narrative, every lie, every smear that they spit upon us, that they piss in our faces, Donald Trump has gone out of his way to validize and give the Democrats something to point to and say, see, Donald Trump is what we've been calling Republicans for years. See, that Donald Trump is the proof. That's why I've said ever since Trump got into the race that he is a stalking horse for Hillary Clinton, that he is a La Clinton Nostra plant, that his role was to sabotage the Republican Party, certainly for this cycle, to ensure the election of Hillary Clinton. But beyond that, and in fact, it might not have been beyond that, but it became that. It became an existential threat to the party itself and to the conservative movement itself when so many Republicans, a large minority, but still 40%, drank the Kool-Aid and became Trumplicans. Became branch Trumpidian cultists. Became the equivalent of Obamunists. Another cult of personality. Gee, that's all we needed. We've been languishing under the tyranny of one cult of personality. You would think we would want to get away from that. You would think we would want to go back to the days of Calvin Coolidge. Silent Cal. When the president was not in your face every single news cycle. When the federal government was not the topmost issue in your thoughts. When we could be left alone by Washington, D.C. No. Trumpicans had to have their own Obama. They had to have their own Bill Clinton. This is the danger and the destructiveness of tribalism, ladies and gentlemen. Well, here's David French, 13 months later, after I was saying and proclaiming these things. And I'm not the only one, but I was among the first. And here he is pointing out Donald Trump confirms communists' worst anti-conservative prejudices. Gee, you think? You can't fight a damaging stereotype by embodying it, and that is exactly what Donald Trump has done. And it proves that he is trying to reinforce those damaging stereotypes. He is, I'd call him a deep cover agent for the Democrat Party, but the idea of deep cover or clandestine, being under cloak and dagger and Donald Trump's personality, kind of hard to pull off. But, of course, Trump did manage to do it. His followers don't realize how badly they're being played, how badly they're being built, how badly they're being swindled. See, in the aftermath of both the Orlando and Dallas massacres, millions of Americans have been absolutely dumbfounded at the response of the Obama administration. In one instance, a Muslim man openly and repeatedly pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. In the other, a black radical openly and repeatedly declared his intention to kill white police officers as retribution for alleged police abuse against African Americans. In both cases, the administration, the regime, stated that it may be difficult to discern the attacker's motives. Yet when Dylan Roof murdered 9 black Americans in Charleston last summer, Charleston, South Carolina, there was no reluctance to ascribe motive then. Gee, I wonder why. Well, the obvious answer is political correctness, the shorthand term not just for silly communist rules of speech, but also for the persistent communist habit of viewing all world events through the prism of identity politics, with the white, Western, Christian, if you will, world the grand villain of contemporary history. Now, the gut instinct response to jihadist violence, or say violence at a Black Lives Matter event, is to ask, what did we do to trigger this? The gut instinct response to violence or oppression perpetrated by white authority figures such as police officers is to take it as confirmation of the evils inherent in the system. Evil! This is why the truly politically correct are never persuaded by those who complain of the double standard described above. If you view the world as a conflict between villains and victims, between oppressors and the oppressed, holding everyone to the same standards of judgment and behavior merely perpetuates the oppression. To a certain kind of communist, white Westerners have already proven that they can't be trusted with power, consumed as they are with racism, sexism, homophobia, bigotry, blah, 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 blah. Oh, trannyphobia, can't leave that out. Blah, 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 blah. While conservatives demand that communists evaluate similar situations using similar principles, many communists believe that the situations aren't similar, that immediately granting the motives of men such as Omar Mateen and Micah Johnson will feed the racist beast, while immediately exposing the motives of men such as Roof will shame a racist culture. In either case, the true villain remains the same. The people who have been driven out of the Republican Party is what it is. Now, it's difficult to overstate the extent to which this worldview depends not just on selective and false readings of history, readings that ignore the power and true nature of non-Western cultures and empires, but also on large-scale stereotyping of the America or Britain or Europe that exists outside communists' urban and academic strongholds. For all too many communists, flyover country is the home of unthinking conservative reactionaries, people who hate and fear the other, in other words, psychological projection, because that describes Obamianists, Democrats, liberals, whatever you want to call them, far more than it does us, and is primed to explode in rage and violence when exposed to culture and political change. What did I just tell you? According to communist doctrine, we are the seething mass, when it is in fact them. Now, the most effective response to the unreason and ignorance of political correctness has always been reason and truth. The politically correct reading of history is so staggeringly wrong, its assessment of man so grotesquely off, that true debate feels almost unfair. For the politically correct communist, true debate is unfair. So they do their best to shut it up and shout it down. Something that Trumplicans seem to enjoy doing these days, doesn't it? When David French was in law school, he once heard free speech derided as one of the master's tools used to build the master's house. Can't win a debate? End it. Now, the worst response to political correctness, one that is tempting to the intemperate and seductive to the actual racist, is trolling, by which you become the stereotype you claim to fight against. This is the ethos of Donald Trump and his most loyal supporters. Infuriate your foe, never back down from a fight, fight, fight! Despite the fact that you're forfeiting all that you once claimed to fight for, and never, ever apologize. The result, ladies and gentlemen, is a movement built on spite, in which the desire to enrage communists creates a continuous font of speech and conduct that works mainly to confirm the communist worldview. In the name of defying political correctness, Trump and his fans do absolutely nothing to temper the worst communist impulses and do much to appall and repulse everyone else. They leave the American people without a morally defensible choice. It's the scold versus the asshole. The scold feels vindicated, the asshole feels gleeful, and everyone else feels despair. Now, make no mistake, Trump is not beating political correctness, he is feeding it. And he knows exactly what he's doing. Every single time he insults women, attacks a judge for his Mexican heritage, passes on anti-Semitic images created by white supremacists, or indulges any of the other truly offensive reflexes that his fans celebrate as proof of his fearlessness, he is doing nothing more than providing the fuel for yet another decade's politically correct fire. And it's easy for him to be fearless because he really doesn't have any interest in being president. He just wants to prove he can win. And after that, he'll quit and go on to the next scam. That's what Donald Trump does. It's who he is. And by tying the GOP to his own unreason and disregard for the truth, he's yanking from the party of Lincoln its best tools for combating communist narratives. Again, you think that's any accident? Not for a New York liberal Democrat con man. I can't count the number of people who've told me they're for Trump because they're sick and tired of political correctness. But fighting back with vicious, aggressive stupidity won't make America great again. Remember, the Constitution is the solution? Douglas V. Gibbs has forgotten that. Why not answer communists with our best arguments? Why not be persistent and fearless in telling the truth? By trolling with Trump instead, we're letting them win. It's as I've said also over the past year, Trumplicans have given up. They've surrendered. They've thrown in the white towel. They put up their hands. We surrender. No mas, no mas. Because it was too difficult. It was too tough. The long war was too tough. They looked for a shortcut that is only sabotaging everything that they once claimed to believe in. So, I mean, for me, this is old home week. This is review. And I imagine for a lot of you who think the way I do, this is review as well. But the lesson's not over yet, folks. It's only just begun.